Hi everyone! Welcome back to the Hive. By now, we all know that our oceans are literally choking on plastic waste. An estimated 150 million metric tons is currently circulating through marine environments, with an additional 8 million metric tons still entering the ocean every year. And 40% of that discarded plastic is from packaging. Today, we are talking with Kirsten Midura, Head of Operations at Sea Hive, an organization dedicated to fighting plastic waste before it enters our oceans. Sea Hive works with companies to help them choose plastic-free packaging for their products and also offers information and educational materials on the plastic pollution problem facing the world today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So excited to learn more about you, and let's just jump right in.
Well, before we get started, I actually brought you a little thank you gift.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
You in your day-to-day sustainability. It's a Sea Hive water bottle.
Beautiful!
So, yes, you can bring that everywhere.
Look at that! Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That is so kind of you.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and I guess eventually how you found your way into sustainability.
Right. So my background actually is in sustainability. I initially came across the subject in undergrad. I was taking sort of like an EZA lab credit science class my senior year of undergrad. And I was fortunate enough to have one of those teachers who is extremely passionate about the subject and Earth systems and the natural environment. And I really gained an early respect for our natural systems and the way that the planet heals itself and is resilient and whatnot. So when I went back to do a master's, I actually elected to do a Master of Environment at the University of Melbourne in Australia. And so I focused on renewable energy, and I actually spent a good majority of my career doing that. So I spent the first 8 or 9 years of my career working in the alternative energy space and energy efficiency, working mostly as a consultant. And during that time, I really saw how the plastic crisis and our waste management problem came to the forefront of our social and environmental conscious. And it's really become one of those major issues. It's become one of the biggest environmental crises of our lifetime. And so when the opportunity came up to sort of work in that field and work with Sea Hive to do something about it, I really jumped at the opportunity to do it. So
I love to hear too that a teacher like so many years ago inspired you. It's amazing. It goes to show really what a great teacher
No, she's great. And actually, I have never reached out to her to thank her, and I really should do that at some point.
I was just going to ask you if she knows what you're up to.
She does not, and so I would need to track her down. But I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. I was trying to find her.
You can send her this video link.
Yeah,
perfect.
Exactly.
So talk to us a little more specifically about Sea Hive and the work you do there.
Yeah, so Sea Hive is a go-to resource for any company who's looking to be more environmentally responsible in their packaging. It started out as a consultancy. We worked with companies like our sister company Pact and a few other product design firms to help them develop plastic-free packaging that was beautiful, that resonated with their environmental ethos, and that really helped them as a marketing tactic as well, having this beautiful plastic-free packaging that they could convey this message to their consumers. So we did start out in that consulting space, but we realized through the process that what we really wanted to do was offer this information open source and allow the general public to access it and to educate themselves and become aware of these options without having to pay restrictive consulting fees. So for companies that don't have the bandwidth or the budget to pay for consultants. So we started publicizing our own lessons learned and our partners' lessons learned on our website open source. And over the last year especially, we've really focused on making that shift to being more of a resource and less of a consulting firm.
Wow, what an amazing way to make that, like, your expertise so accessible for anyone.
I think so. And I think that there's a general shift among society where people really want to be offering this information, and we all have this collective common goal of improving our environment and helping our planet. So I think this is something that you're going to see a lot more with a lot of different companies, which is great.
We're all in this together mentality.
I mean, it's exactly the same with what you guys are doing here, trying to get that information out there and achieve a common goal. So,
yeah, it's true. Yeah. Speaking of common goals, you mentioned Pact briefly just now. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship you guys have?
Sure, yeah. So Pact is our sister company. They're a travel goods company that is really focused on using responsibly sourced materials and committed to plastic-free packaging in all of their packaging needs. So they do a travel duffel bag called the Pact One bag, that's P-A-K-T. They also just came out with a travel coffee kit, and they're working on a backpack at the moment. So definitely check them out. They were featured on the Minimalist documentary, and it's been a pretty big hit. So
great, cool.
They're a great company.
Definitely will be checking that out
absolutely.
for my own personal needs. So one of the ideals at Sea Hive I have here is that doing good and maximizing profit should not be separate paths.
Right.
So how are you finding that single path, hopefully?
I mean, well, in terms of, cost is always a consideration that people have. And I think that there is this stigma around environmental responsibility where people think that it just naturally costs more. And I don't necessarily think that's true at all. I think that for the majority of products and companies, there are sustainable packaging solutions, and by that I mean recycled materials, recyclable materials, bio-based materials, things that aren't single-use plastics. I think there are options for packaging that is more sustainable and more environmentally responsible that are also cost competitive. One of our partners that we're working with is Pratt Industries, and they are one of the largest packaging suppliers in the world that focuses on 100% recycled corrugated materials. So, and they've been around for about 20 years. So you can't do that unless you are cost competitive in the market. And I think they're a real success story around recycled content in the packaging industry. Now, where cost does actually come into consideration and can be prohibitive is some of the more specific requirements that some packaging requires. So I was on the phone yesterday with one of our partners, Zenpak, and they offer both recycled and virgin materials based on their customers' needs. They also do design work. And they were saying that it's the molded inserts, for example. So that's like if you get an iPhone, it's the molded plastic part that comes in the box that holds the actual phone.
Right.
So that's a very specific requirement that Apple would have, or maybe a phone company. And because of the physical nature of virgin plastic, it's malleable, it's elastic, it can be molded into these molds for a pretty cheap cost. That's something where the cost of doing the exact same thing with recycled materials, there's a lot more processes that go into that. There's it's more energy intensive, it's more water intensive. So it is actually cost prohibitive for that particular component. But there are other alternatives like folded corrugate paper that could potentially serve the same purpose. And I think what it comes down to is really just finding a packaging supplier and designer who understands your needs, who understands your budget, who understands what options are out there and are available, and also shares that core value of being environmentally responsible. So those are the types of the companies that we're trying to partner with and we're trying to promote more so that they can actually meet those needs in an ecological way.
So you talked about budgeting and finances in regards to the companies, but what about the consumer? How does the financial burden reflect on them?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was talking about with being competitive in a competitive market. And in my experience, I haven't really seen that cost being transferred onto the consumer. I think that that's a line item and a budget that a company needs to account for. And I think everybody that I've met has incorporated that into their own business model. I don't really see that being passed on to the consumer. That's not to say that it doesn't happen, but I personally haven't experienced that. So
that's great. Yeah. That's the answer we want to hear.
Yeah, right? Sustainability can be environmentally and financially responsible.
Totally. We just did an episode on how to keep it sustainable in your personal life and in your wallet, and it's totally possible.
Absolutely.
So what do you think of companies like Amazon who have this kind of little checkbox while you're buying that says the least amount of boxes as possible, please, or this specific type of sustainable packaging? They're giving this option to consumers, which is wonderful. Of course, we can't ignore that. But how do you feel about that?
I think that for any company, there's a certain level of accountability and responsibility that they should be taking on, both with regard to the environment, but also with regard to their customers. So a customer can do any amount of research that they want to do, make sure that they're buying the most sustainable product, with the longest lifespan. And they don't really get a say in how that's packaged and sent to them. So the decision lies with the company, but the burden of actually disposing of those packaging materials properly falls onto the customer. So I do think that companies need to take that into account. And I think that by using single-use plastic in their packaging, they're not being considerate or responsible for either their consumer or for the environment. That said, I think companies can also be looking at their packaging as a marketing opportunity. It is a literal touch point for the consumer to engage with the brand. And companies spend a lot of time and energy and money on making their website look good or making their marketing materials look good. Obviously, their products look good. The packaging that a product comes in is also a way for them to interact and send a message to their customers saying, did you notice that this package came without any plastic? That's something that we do in the packaging that we do for Pact, is very clearly state that message. And it's an opportunity to educate the consumer, and it's an opportunity to really convey that message of, look, we're taking care of you. So I think that that's a little bit of a mind frame shift that a lot of companies could adopt. In terms of Amazon, getting back to your original question, Amazon is a beast all of its own, right? It's literally transformed the packaging industry in the way that it operates. And doing things like having these little checkboxes is great to an extent, but they're also solving problems that they themselves have created. So this isn't, necessarily a standard problem that everybody needs to address. I think they're making some efforts, but in some ways they're also regressing. Like they've started using blister packs, so basically bubble wrap, for a lot of their smaller packages, which is lighter, and so it's easier to ship smaller things in individual packages, but at the same time, obviously, there's an environmental cost that comes with that. And that's something that really needs to be looked at. And for a company as big as Amazon, they're operating in uncharted waters, so it's not like there's a precedent to follow. But maybe for them, they need to start being a little bit innovative and thinking out of the literal box and start, possibly like a packaging buyback program. Maybe it's not going to be materials oriented. Maybe it's going to be program oriented, where they could recollect the packaging material and reuse it in further shipments or something like that. They're also starting to do drone deliveries. So maybe with that sort of innovation, that will render some of the conventional packaging moot in a lot of situations. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation and to be industry leaders. And I think that they're probably not quite there yet, but right. There's some movements being made. At least there's some acknowledgement. Yeah. But there obviously could be more that companies can do, especially Amazon.
Totally. There's some effort there, which we can see and acknowledge, and that's nice. But I happen to agree with you that for being such a trailblazing company, there lies greater responsibility. Right. And I love this idea that you mentioned, that a company can sort of forge a relationship with their consumer through their packaging, and that could be something Amazon could explore definitely more.
Yeah, I really don't think it needs to be all gloom and doom. I think that a lot of these market gaps are, in fact, opportunities for companies to really innovate and really be market leaders. And I think that that's the way that it should be framed.
Yeah. So I love that. It's absolutely true. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the education and awareness aspect of Sea Hive?
Yes. So that's something that we have worked on in the past, but that we're really planning to ramp up, especially this year. I think that the plastic pollution crisis and the waste management crisis that we are experiencing right now, this isn't something that's new. This is something that's been around for a while, but it's only really begun to come to the forefront of our public awareness since China stopped taking our recycling. And then all of a sudden, this crisis that has been around for ages is all of a sudden on the front page of all of these news outlets, or is being used as a marketing ploy by so many different companies. And because people are only just becoming aware of it, in terms of the average consumer is just becoming aware of this. And a lot of companies are capitalizing on this. And there's a lot of greenwashing going on, which is a term you hear a lot, which is basically a company saying, look, we're doing this to be environmentally friendly, when in fact they're just concerned with their own bottom line. So part of the education and awareness component that we want to bring into Sea Hive is dispelling some of these myths and rumors and bringing some visibility to packaging, because I think the middle of the supply chain is an area that people don't really think about in their day-to-day lives. And it's only become really prominent in the public consciousness since Amazon, you know, started delivering packages with all of this plastic, or since China stopped taking out recycling. So we want to build on our own experiences and on the experiences of our partners who have been in this industry for decades, and the general public. So if there are people who have questions or are confused or are getting a lot of misinformation or conflicting messages, and they come to us and they say, hey, can you please, you know, educate us on this, then that's something that, I mean, I come from an environmental science background, so I want to dig into these things and give you the right answer with actual resources. So that's sort of what we're trying to build up with the education component.
That's wonderful to be able to provide an educational service that really has the best intentions, and to be able to trust that when you go and look on your website or have a meeting with you guys, to know that you have the best interest in.
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. And obviously we have a bit of a vested interest in promoting the companies that we partner with. The way that we're funded is mostly right now through Pact, but we're beginning with the beginning of this partnership program where we are getting some share of the revenue that we generate for them. So there is, you know, obviously we're benefiting from that because we're a company, but at the same time, we're going to the effort of vetting the companies that we work with, because we are very mission driven and we want to work with people whose top priority is the environment, you know, who have a triple bottom line incorporated into their business model. So it's part of what we want to do is take out the guesswork for companies and people who are maybe newer to this field than we are or our partners are. So providing taking out some of the barriers to entry, basically.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Demystifying the whole thing for all of us. So Sea Hive has ambassadors. What's that about?
Ambassadors. I love our ambassadors. So we are in this super sexy spot in the middle of the supply chain that everybody loves, of course. We find it interesting, but we get that it can probably be kind of dry for some people. So we partner with our ambassadors who are people further downstream who actually see the day-to-day effects of plastic pollution, specifically in our oceans. So at Sea Hive, we are all some sort of marine enthusiasts. I'm a diver and a sailor. Our founder is a sailor and does a lot of fishing and a lot of water sports. We have a lot of, you know, people who are constantly on the water. So the ocean holds a very special place in our hearts. And so we partner with ambassadors who are professional marine enthusiasts, so professional sailors and professional divers and so on, who really see the impacts of ocean plastic and plastic pollution on a daily basis and are working to raise awareness around this, who we can work with and promote their work and they can promote ours, and it's a symbiotic relationship. We have a few people like Ben LeCompte, who is swimming across the Pacific Ocean to raise awareness around the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We work with Weldon Wade, who is a diver out in Bermuda, who's really pioneering conservation efforts around the coral reefs that surround Bermuda. We have Stephanie Roble is campaigning right now to be on the U.S. Olympic team for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo for sailing. So we're working with some pretty big name people who really see what damage plastic pollution is having on our reefs, on our oceans, and, you know, in places that we care about. So
it's so great to have these truths coming out of these iconic people.
Well, right.
You know, that people that we all look up to and aspire to be like, you know, in some way or another. That's a really great idea. I love that.
They're working on some really cool stuff, and we're like, look, what I think is interesting about that program is that we have a similar goal, like in a shared mission, but in totally different parts of the supply chain. Like we're working on plastic packaging, they're working on sailing and diving, and yet somehow we are all working together toward the same goal. So
yeah, that common ground.
Exactly. So it's unifying. It's great.
Yes, absolutely.
It's great. I mean, it's tragedy that that's what we're unifying over, but
sure is.
Yeah, but you know, we're chipping away. So
yeah, we sure are. We sure are. So Sea Hive encourages folks to share fun ocean stories with you guys. Do you have one that you'd like to share with us?
So, yeah, I mean, my fun ocean story is kind of just my whole life. I actually was conceived on our family's boat in Tahiti, and yeah,
Amazing.
yeah, I know. So the ocean is in my blood in some sense.
Yeah.
But my parents flew back to Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm from, and had me. And then when I was about 6 months old, the three of us flew back down to the South Pacific, where I spent the first 2 years of my life on our family sailboat, sailing around like Tonga and
Wow.
New Zealand and whatnot. So yeah, it's cool. So a couple years ago, or a few years ago now, my mom and I went back to New Zealand and did like a road trip around there. And at one point we're standing on this beach and my mom's like, can't remember if it was that apartment building or that one, but that's where you lived when you were like 2 years old. And I'm like, I have no recollection of it.
Sure.
But ever since then, I mean, we still have that boat. I sail on it every year. Since then, I've become a master diver and have been doing that for over a decade now. And
Incredible.
so the ocean is like second nature to me. I love it.
Oh, I'm
It's great.
so jealous.
Yeah,
like
you should come
my
out sailing
cool
sometime.
ocean story is like I went swimming once. Like I don't know. That
You
is
should come
so
out.
great.
It's pretty fun.
I
so.
would love that. I would love that. I'm going to hold you to that. So finally, let's wrap up with, it's like one of those questions that's so hard to answer, but what is one of your favorite sustainability tips for all of us to
Yeah.
hear?
I think that the most important advice or tip that I could give is to remember that reduce, reuse, recycle is actually a priority list. It's not just a bunch of suggestions. It's like, first you should reduce. So when it comes to packaging, that means buy local, right? Reduce your actual need for packaging. So go to the grocery store instead of buying through Fresh Direct or Amazon Fresh or whatever those are. Actually go to the store, decline using a plastic bag, bring your own mug places, really eliminate that need for packaging in your life by supporting the businesses around you. Second priority is reuse. So for packaging, when I get a package, if it has, the blister packs, the bubble wrap, I actually have a little segment in my closet where I just store it so that if I have to go ship something, I have that packaging already there. I'm reusing it.
Perfect.
That's new packaging that I don't need to take off the shelf and, have replaced. And if you don't ship things very often or if you don't have space for that, you can usually bring your packaging to like your local pack and ship and they can reuse it. So there is that, sort of second option. And then recycling really should be more of a last resort. It's not the silver bullet to sustainability. It's still very energy intensive. It's very water intensive. It requires a lot of effort. And the more you recycle any sort of material, the more that it loses its quality. So if you can reduce and then reuse first, those are always going to be better. And then recycling should be a last resort. So
That is a great tip. I've never ever heard it put that way.
no, because whoever it was that designed that logo made it like circular,
Yes.
which I have always had an issue with. I used to TA for a sustainability class during my master's. And I remember that one of the topics they had us write about, or that I had them write about, I guess, is, talk about reduce, reuse, recycle and what that means. And that was sort of the main lesson that I got out of that was, yes, this is a step-by-step process. This is not just a general,
Here's
list
some
of
good
suggestions.
ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
So,
You really have totally, I don't know, opened my eyes to that.
That's great.
I'm going to live by that now.
great. That's the goal. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. This was such an amazing conversation.
yeah, my
and
absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I got
This
a
is great.
water bottle. I got
Coming out on
an
top.
invitation to go sailing. I got
Right?
the best stuff ever.
Look, sustainability can be fun. I promise.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of the efforts, and we're so happy to have you here and learn more about what you do. Can't wait to
pleasure.
learn more.
Thank you so much.